When Detective Marcus Williams turned the key to his partner's apartment, he expected to find James hungover or sick. He didn't expect to step into a crime scene that would unravel everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the deadly price of living a lie. The key stuck in the lock. Marcus jiggled it, cursing under his breath. James Carter had been AWOL for 2 days, the longest disappearance in 12 years of partnership. Marcus had covered for him with Captain Rodriguez, spinning stories about food poisoning and family emergencies, but his excuses were running thin. The door finally gave way. "James, you better be dying in here, man, because Rodriguez is ready to—" The words died in his throat. Furniture lay scattered like broken teeth. A coffee table balanced on its side, one leg snapped clean off. Glass sparkled across the hardwood floor, and on the far wall, someone had finger-painted a message in what looked suspiciously like blood. "The truth will kill you." Marcus's hand found his Glock without conscious thought. "Atlanta PD, anyone here?" Silence. He stepped carefully through the debris, noting overturned chairs, a shattered picture frame, books scattered like dead birds. His boot crunched on something. Looking down, he saw blue pills scattered across the floor like confetti. He knelt, picked one up. The label read, Truvada. Marcus had heard that name in departmental health briefings. HIV medication. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Your friend had a secret. Now you know too." Marcus stared at the pill in his palm. James Carter. Straight-laced James, who never missed church, who'd had the same girlfriend for 3 years until she moved to California, who preached about the importance of honesty in police work, was HIV positive, and apparently someone else knew it too. The call came in while Marcus was still standing in James's destroyed living room, holding a Truvada pill like evidence of betrayal. "Williams." He answered his radio with one hand, his other still clutching the medication. "We got a homicide," dispatch crackled. "Officer involved. 1247 Highland Avenue, apartment 3A. Marcus's blood went cold. Highland Avenue was 3 blocks away. "Officer involved how?" "Victim is David Thompson, 26, patrol officer. Looks like blunt force trauma to the head." The pill slipped from Marcus's fingers. David Thompson, the kid from Savannah who transferred in 2 months ago, eager and bright-eyed, always asking James for advice on cases. The one who stayed late to help with paperwork. The one James had mentioned a few too many times in casual conversation. Marcus ran. By the time he reached the Pinnacle apartment complex, the scene was already crawling with police. Captain Rodriguez stood outside the building, her face grim, talking into her radio. She spotted Marcus jogging up and waved him over. "What's your partner's status, Williams?" "Still missing. Why?" Rodriguez didn't answer directly. "Thompson's apartment is a mess, signs of struggle. Blood pattern suggests he was struck with a heavy object, probably glass." She paused, studying Marcus's face. "Neighbors heard arguing around 10 p.m. Male voices. That doesn't mean—" One neighbor thinks she saw a black male fleeing the scene around 11 p.m. Medium height, athletic build. Rodriguez's stare didn't waver. "Sound familiar?" Marcus's mouth went dry. "James wouldn't hurt anyone." "Where is he, Marcus?" "I don't know." For the first time in 20 years of police work, Marcus wasn't sure if he was telling the truth or protecting a friend who might not deserve protection. Detective Lisa Chen had the personality of a tax audit and the technical skills of a computer. She sat in the police station's computer lab at 2 a.m., her third energy drink empty beside a pile of David Thompson's electronics. Marcus hovered behind her chair, watching her fingers fly across the keyboard. Every few minutes she'd pause, frown, and dive deeper into David's digital life. "Got something?" Chen said finally. Thompson's phone was wiped, but the cloud backup is intact. She pulled up a messaging app. 3 months of texts between him and a contact listed as J. Marcus leaned closer. The messages started professionally enough. J, Nov, 15. "Good work on the Peterson case today. David, Nov, 15. Thanks, still figuring out the computer system. J, Nov, 15. Coffee later? I can walk you through the database." But by December, the tone had shifted. David, Deck 22. "Can't stop thinking about what you said." J, Deck 22. "Which part?" David, deck 22. All of it. J, deck 22. This is dangerous territory. David, deck 22. For who? J, deck 22. Both of us. David, deck 22. Worth the risk, though Marcus felt like he was reading someone's diary. These weren't the messages of colleagues, the intimacy in the words, the late-night timestamps, the gradual shift from professional to personal. It painted a clear picture. Chen scrolled to January. The messages got bolder. David, Jan 18, 11:47 p.m. Can't sleep. J, Jan 18, 11:48 p.m. Me neither. David, Jan 18, 11:52 p.m. Keep thinking about your hands. J, Jan 18, 11:55 p.m. David, John 18, 11:56 p.m. I know it's complicated. J, John 18, 11:58 p.m. Meet me tomorrow, David, John to 18, 11:58 p.m. Your place or mine, J, John to 18, 11:59 p.m. Somewhere safe. Marcus's chest tightened. James, straight, church-going, girlfriend having James, was having an affair. With a male officer, a subordinate. There's more, Chen said quietly. She scrolled to the final exchange, time-stamped the night David died. David, March 12th, 9:30 p.m. We need to talk right now. J, March 12th, 9:32 p.m. What's wrong? You sound upset, David. March 12th, 9:33 p.m. 8 years. James, 8 fucking years. Marcus stopped breathing. There it was, James's name, typed in anger. J, March 12th, 9:35 p.m. I can explain, David. March 12th, 9:36 p.m. Explain what? That you've been lying to me? That you put me at risk? J, March 12th, 9:37 p.m. It's not what you think, David. March 12th, 9:38 p.m. My apartment, now. J, March 12th, 9:40 p.m. We can work through this. David, March 12th, 9:40 p.m. Can we? Can we really? The thread ended there, but Chen clicked another folder. Drafts, she said. Messages David typed but never sent. There was only one, time-stamped. 9:42 p.m. I loved you so much I would have been okay with it. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? Marcus stared at the screen. David had been writing a message of forgiveness when he died. Whatever happened that night, it wasn't planned. It was a tragedy born of fear, secrecy, and a conversation that went terribly wrong. Chen, Marcus said, his voice rough. Run a trace on Jay's number, she typed rapidly. Number registered to James Carter. Marcus closed his eyes. His partner of 12 years, the man he'd trusted with his life countless times, was now the prime suspect in the murder of a young officer whose only crime was falling in love with the wrong man. Bernard Price had the kind of face that made children cross the street, permanently suspicious, with small eyes and a mouth that seemed incapable of smiling without malice. He'd been a detective for 15 years, but everyone knew he stayed because he liked the authority more than the justice. He found Marcus in the break room at 6 a.m., pouring coffee with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since he'd seen the text messages. Rough night, Williams? Price asked, filling his own mug. Heard about Thompson. Shame. Marcus didn't look up. Yeah. Course, can't say I'm surprised. That got Marcus's attention. What's that supposed to mean? Price shrugged, adding sugar to his coffee with deliberate slowness. Kid was asking for trouble. They always do. They? Come on, Marcus. We both know what Thompson was. Price stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking against the ceramic. Saw him at Paradise Motel back in February, with your partner. Marcus set down his coffee cup carefully. You want to repeat that? Paradise Motel, Route 85, outside the city limits. Real discreet place, if you know what I mean. Price's smile was ugly. Carter's car in the parking lot, Thompson going up to room 237, together. You followed them? Didn't have to. I was there on business. Imagine my surprise when I saw 2 of Atlanta's finest conducting their own private meeting. Marcus felt heat rising in his chest. What kind of business? Price's smile widened. The kind that pays better than police work. But that's not important. What's important is what I did with that information. Which was? Called Carter the next day. Friendly conversation. Reminded him how much he valued his career, his reputation. Mentioned how unfortunate it would be if certain information became public. Marcus's fist connected with Price's jaw before he realized he'd thrown the punch. The older detective stumbled backward, coffee splashing across his shirt. "You blackmailed them," Marcus said. Price straightened, rubbing his face. "I protected the department's reputation, and I made a little money on the side. Win-win." "What money?" "Carter was very motivated to keep me happy. Shared information about upcoming raids, evidence locker schedules. I had clients who appreciated advance notice." Marcus grabbed Price by the shirt. "You sold out police operations?" "Easy, Williams. You assault a fellow officer, that's your career." Price straightened his tie. "Besides, it's all hypothetical now. Carter's gone, Thompson's dead, no witnesses." Marcus released him, disgusted. "Except you." "Except me. And I'm very reasonable about what I remember and what I forget, for the right consideration." Marcus walked away before he killed the man. Dr. Michael Hassan looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat beard was unkempt, his scrubs wrinkled, and his hands shook slightly as he flipped through David Thompson's medical file. "I shouldn't be talking to you without a warrant," he said. "Officer Thompson is dead," Marcus replied. "My partner is missing and wanted for questioning. Help me understand what happened." Hassan closed the file, removed his glasses, and rubbed his eyes. David came in Tuesday evening for routine blood work results, standard annual physical for transferred officers. And the HIV test came back positive. Marcus had expected it, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. How did he react? Like someone whose world had just ended. Hassan put his glasses back on. He kept saying there must be a mistake, asked me to run the test again. When I explained that false positives were extremely rare, he wanted to know about transmission windows, about how long he might have been infected. What did you tell him? The truth. That HIV can be undetectable for months after transmission, that he could have been infected anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months ago. Marcus did the math. David had transferred to Atlanta 2 months ago. If he'd been infected in the past 6 months, it had happened here, with James. Did he mention anyone specifically? Hassan hesitated. He asked about another officer, James Carter. Wanted to know if I'd treated him, if I knew his status. Did you tell him? Patient confidentiality prevented me from sharing specifics, but I may have indicated that he should ask the person directly. Marcus leaned forward. Doctor, did James Carter know his HIV status? I can't. A young man is dead. Another man's life is ruined. How long has James been positive? Hassan was quiet for a long moment. 8 years. He's been on medication for 8 years. His viral load has been undetectable for the past 5. 8 years. James had been living with HIV for 8 years, and Marcus had never known. How many other secrets had his partner been carrying? Is it possible James infected David? Possible, but unlikely if he was consistent with medication. Undetectable viral load makes transmission extremely rare. Hassan paused. But fear doesn't listen to statistics. If David thought James had infected him, intentionally or not, he didn't need to finish. Marcus understood. Fear and betrayal were motives for murder. But which one of them had been the killer? Eleanor Watson's apartment smelled like cats and old perfume. She sat on her flowered couch, clutching a tissue, her pale blue eyes darting between Detective Chen and the wall she shared with David Thompson's apartment. He was such a quiet boy, she said. Always polite. Always said, "Good evening, ma'am," when we passed in the hallway. Chen sat across from her, notebook ready. "Tell me about Tuesday night." "Well, Mrs. Watson glanced toward the shared wall. "I keep my window open at night. These old buildings get so stuffy. Around 10 o'clock I heard his door slam, hard enough to rattle my china cabinet. Then what? Voices, angry at first, then louder. I tried to ignore it. People have their disagreements. But then someone screamed." Her hand trembled against her tissue. Not angry screaming, desperate, like someone drowning. Chen leaned forward. "Could you make out any words?" "Liar." That word over and over, and a name. James, I think. Then crashes, like furniture breaking. Mrs. Watson stood abruptly, walked to her window. "I should have called someone. Should have. Did you see anyone leave the building?" The pause stretched too long. Chen waited. "There was a man," Mrs. Watson finally said. "Running. His shirt was torn. White shirt, I think." Another pause. "He was colored." The way she said it, not black, not African American, made Chen's pen stop moving. He looked frightened, Mrs. Watson continued, like he'd seen something terrible. I thought... She trailed off. You thought what? I thought it was just their kind of trouble. You know how they can be. Loud, violent. She said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. I didn't want to get involved in all that. Chen's jaw tightened. What time was this? Around 11, maybe a little after. Mrs. Watson looked up, her eyes suddenly wide and innocent. I wasn't being prejudiced, detective. You learn to mind your own business. Chen closed her notebook. As she stood to leave, Mrs. Watson called after her. He really was a nice boy, that David. Always helped me with my groceries. Chen paused at the door. Mrs. Watson, what would you have done if it was your white neighbor making those sounds? The question hung in the air. Mrs. Watson's silence was answer enough. Marcus found James's patrol car at 3 a.m., parked neatly at the Chattahoochee River Bridge overlook. The car was unlocked, keys in the ignition, radio silent. On the passenger seat was a manila envelope with Marcus written in James's careful handwriting. Marcus sat in his own car for 10 minutes, staring at the envelope. Whatever was inside would change everything. Once he read it, James would either be his friend making a terrible mistake or a murderer leaving a confession. He opened it. Marcus, if you're reading this, you've probably figured out most of it already. You were always the better detective. I loved David Thompson. Not the way you're supposed to love a fellow officer. Not the way a mentor cares for a rookie. I loved him like I've never loved anyone in my life. And I killed him. Not with my hands, though I might as well have. I killed him with 8 years of lies, with fear disguised as protection, with the cowardice of a man who wanted love more than he wanted truth. David found out about my status Tuesday night. His HIV test came back positive, and he put the pieces together. When he called me, his voice was... I can't describe it. Pain and rage and heartbreak all mixed together. I went to his apartment thinking I could explain, make him understand. The viral load numbers, the medication, the infinitesimal risk of transmission. Statistics to justify what I'd done. But David didn't want statistics. He wanted trust. He wanted honesty. He wanted the respect of being told the truth so he could make his own choices. I'd stolen that from him. We fought. Not physically at first, just words. But words can cut deeper than knives, and I watched 8 years of secrets tear apart the best thing that ever happened to me. He grabbed a piece of broken glass, said if his life was over, he'd end it himself. I tried to stop him. We struggled. He fell. I should have called 911, should have tried to save him. Instead, I ran like the coward I've always been. By now you've found the corruption. Price has been selling information for months. I was so focused on hiding my personal life that I missed what was happening right under my nose. Another failure to add to the list. I can't live with what I've done, Marcus. I can't face David's mother. Can't sit in a courtroom and watch them destroy his memory to save my skin. Can't pretend there's a future after this. The department will be better without us. Both of us. Take care of yourself, partner. You deserved a better friend than me. James. Marcus read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Then he got out of his car and walked to the bridge railing. The Chattahoochee River flowed dark and quiet 50 feet below. In the distance, Atlanta's skyline glittered like scattered diamonds. Beautiful and distant and utterly indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its shadows. Marcus pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Detective Williams. I need dive teams at Chattahoochee Bridge. Possible suicide. But even as he made the call, he didn't believe James was in that water. The letter felt like misdirection, like James trying to throw them off his scent. His partner was many things, but he wasn't a quitter. James Carter was still alive, and Marcus was going to find him. Officer Jake Miller and his German shepherd, Rex, arrived at the bridge as the sun was rising. Rex was 5 years old, chocolate and black, with intelligent brown eyes and a nose that could find a needle in a haystack if the needle had the right scent. "What are we looking for?" Miller asked. Marcus handed him one of James's old T-shirts from the patrol car. James Carter, missing 3 days, wanted for questioning in a homicide. Rex sniffed the shirt thoroughly, his tail wagging slowly as he processed the scent. Then Miller gave the command. "Rex, such." The dog immediately put his nose to the ground and began working in a systematic pattern around the bridge area. Marcus watched, impressed, despite everything by the dog's focus and precision. After 20 minutes, Rex stopped at a thick cluster of bushes near the riverbank. He sat and barked once, the signal for "found something." Miller pushed through the undergrowth and emerged holding a black messenger bag. "This belonged to your guy?" Marcus recognized it immediately. James's bag, the one he carried case files in. Inside were James's wallet, his backup weapon, and a leather-bound journal. Marcus opened the journal with trembling hands. The first entry was dated 8 years ago, March 15th, 2016. "Doctor says I'm HIV positive. Feels like the end of the world. How do I tell anyone? How do I keep working? How do I ever have a normal life?" Marcus flipped through pages of James's private hell, the fear, the isolation, the carefully constructed lies. Entry after entry documenting a man slowly disappearing into his own secrets. Then, 3 months ago, the tone changed. December 10th, 2023. Met the new transfer today. David Thompson from Savannah. Bright kid, asks good questions. Reminds me of myself when I started, except he still believes in heroes. December 22nd, 2023. David stayed late to help with the Martinez case files. We talked for 2 hours about everything except work. He has this laugh that makes me forget every bad thing that's ever happened. January 8th, 2024. I think I'm falling in love with him. This is dangerous. This is stupid. This will ruin both our careers. But God help me, I can't stop. Marcus felt like he was reading a love story written in code. James had been documenting his feelings for David, page after page of a man trying to convince himself that love was worth the risk. The last entry was dated the day David died, March 12th, 2024. Going to tell him tonight. About everything? He deserves the truth, even if it means losing him. I'd rather have his honesty than his ignorance. Found out David's been getting anonymous threats. Someone knows about us. Price, probably. Going to deal with that too. No more secrets. No more fear. If I lose David, at least I'll lose him honestly. Rex barked again, pulling Marcus from the journal. The dog had continued searching and was now sitting beside a narrow trail that led away from the river, deeper into the woods. "He didn't jump," Marcus said. "He's still out there." The trail led through 2 miles of pine forest before emerging at a small hunting cabin tucked into a grove of oak trees. Rex sat at the front door and barked once. Marcus approached carefully, weapon drawn. The cabin was dark, but smoke drifted from the chimney. Someone was inside. "James, it's Marcus. I'm coming in." The door was unlocked. Marcus stepped inside and found James Carter sitting at a small wooden table, staring at an empty bottle of bourbon. His friend looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he'd disappeared in. "Hey, partner," James said without looking up. "Took you long enough." Marcus holstered his weapon, but didn't relax. "You okay?" "Define okay?" James gestured to the empty bottle. "Found this place Tuesday night. Been trying to drink myself to death ever since, but turns out I'm too much of a coward for that too." Marcus sat down across from him. The cabin was sparse, one room with a bed, table, and fireplace. Hunting trophies on the walls stared down with glassy eyes. "Tell me what happened with David." James finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. "You read the messages?" "Yeah." "Then you know most of it." James picked up the empty bottle, tilted it toward his mouth, remembered it was empty. "I loved him, Marcus. First time in my life, I understood what that word really meant. And the HIV? 8 years I've been positive. 8 years of hiding, lying, pretending to be someone else. The medication works. My viral load's been undetectable for 5 years. Risk of transmission is essentially 0. But you didn't tell David. How could I? Hey, I'm falling in love with you, but by the way, I have a disease that most people think is a death sentence. He would have run." Marcus leaned forward. "Or he would have understood. Maybe, probably, but I was too scared to find out." James set down the bottle. "When he called Tuesday night, I knew it was over. His voice. I'd never heard anyone sound so broken." "Walk me through what happened." James closed his eyes. "I went to his apartment. He was waiting by the door, and I could see it in his face. The betrayal, the fear, the anger. He started yelling before I even got inside. About the HIV, about the lying. That's what hurt him most. Not the virus, but the fact that I didn't trust him with the truth. He said, James's voice cracked. He said he would have been okay with it if I'd just told him. Marcus waited. We argued for maybe an hour. He kept asking why I didn't trust him, and I kept trying to explain about the stigma, the department, Price's threats, making excuses. Price was threatening you? For months. He saw us at a motel back in February, started demanding money and information, said he'd destroy both our careers if I didn't cooperate. Marcus felt a familiar anger building. You should have come to me. With what? Hey Marcus, I'm gay and HIV positive and being blackmailed? You would have been obligated to report it. I would have helped you. I know, but I was too proud to ask. James stood up, walked to the window. David got more upset as we talked, started throwing things, saying his life was over. Then he grabbed a piece of broken glass from a picture frame. Marcus tensed. To hurt you? To hurt himself. Said if he was going to die anyway, he'd do it on his own terms. James turned back to Marcus. I tried to stop him. We struggled. He slipped and fell backward, hit his head on the corner of the coffee table. Was he dead when he hit the floor? I checked for a pulse, tried CPR, but the impact... James's voice broke completely. There was so much blood. Marcus sat in silence, processing. It wasn't murder. It was a tragic accident during a suicide attempt. But James had fled the scene, making it look like murder. Why didn't you call 911? Because I'm a coward, James said simply. Because I was terrified of having to explain why a young officer killed himself in my presence. Because I knew how it would look. Older detective, HIV positive, preying on a subordinate. So you ran. So I ran, like the piece of shit I've always been. Marcus stood up. James, you need to come back with me. Tell the truth. There are people who can help. No. James's voice was firm. I'm done running, but I'm also done destroying lives. David's family doesn't need to know he was gay. The department doesn't need this scandal. Everyone's better off if I just disappear. That's not your choice to make. It's the only choice I have left. Marcus looked at his friend, his partner, his brother in everything but blood, and saw a man who had been carrying too much weight for too long. James wasn't just grieving David's death. He was grieving 8 years of living a lie, of hiding fundamental truths about himself, of being so afraid of rejection that he'd chosen isolation instead. Come back with me, Marcus said again. We'll figure it out together. James smiled sadly. You always were the better man, Marcus. David saw that too. He used to say you were the kind of cop he wanted to be when he grew up. Don't talk about him in past tense, and don't talk about yourself like you're already dead. Aren't I? Before Marcus could answer, Rex started barking outside. Then Marcus heard what the dog had detected. Vehicles approaching. Multiple vehicles. James heard it too. You brought backup. I called it in when we found your bag. How many? Marcus listened to the engines. Sounds like half the department. James nodded, unsurprised. They'll want to take me alive. Big trial, lots of media attention, good for everyone's career. James, except mine. James walked to the fireplace, picked up a poker, and except David's memory. Put that down. I won't go to trial, Marcus. I won't sit in a courtroom and watch them destroy David to save myself. I won't let his mother hear about her son's private life from some prosecutor trying to make a name for himself. The vehicles were getting closer. Marcus could see headlights through the trees. There's another way, Marcus said. Plea bargain. Manslaughter, not murder. You could be out in 5 years. 5 years of living with what I did? 5 years of knowing David died because I was too much of a coward to tell him the truth? James raised the poker. I don't think so. James Carter, a voice boomed through a megaphone outside. This is Captain Rodriguez. We have the cabin surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. James looked at Marcus with something like peace in his eyes. Tell his mother I'm sorry. Tell her David was brave and kind and everything good about police work. Tell her he died trying to help someone who wasn't worth saving. James, don't... But James Carter was already walking toward the door, the poker raised like a weapon, ready to force the kind of ending that would spare everyone else the messy complications of truth. Marcus tackled him before he reached the threshold. They went down hard. Marcus's 190 pounds driving James into the wooden floor with a crash that rattled the cabin's windows. The poker skittered away across the room. "Get off me!" James struggled beneath him. "Let me finish this." "No." Marcus pinned James's arms, using his weight advantage. "You don't get to take the easy way out." "Easy?" James bucked against Marcus's grip. "You think this is easy? Easier than living with it? Easier than facing David's family? Easier than doing the work to make this right?" Outside, boots were moving through the underbrush. Rex's barking had turned to excited whining. The dog knew his humans were safe. "Williams!" Captain Rodriguez's voice. "Report!" "We're okay," Marcus called back. "Carter's secured." James stopped struggling. "Secured? Like I'm some perp you just arrested." "Aren't you?" The question hung between them. James looked up at Marcus, his partner, his friend, the man who'd covered for him for 12 years without question. "Yeah," James said quietly. "I guess I am." Marcus released his grip and sat back. James made no move to run or fight. Instead, he lay on the floor staring at the ceiling, tears running down his face. "I loved him so much," James whispered, "and I killed him anyway." "You didn't kill him. Fear killed him. Secrecy killed him. A society that makes people choose between love and honesty killed him." "That's a nice speech, but it doesn't change what happened." The cabin door opened. Captain Rodriguez entered first, followed by 2 patrol officers and Detective Chen. All had their weapons drawn, but when they saw James lying unresisting on the floor, they lowered them. "James Carter," Rodriguez said formally, "you're under arrest for the death of David Thompson. You have the right to remain silent." As Rodriguez read the Miranda rights, Marcus helped James to his feet. His friend looked smaller somehow, as if confessing had physically diminished him. "One thing," James said as they cuffed him. "David's phone. There's a draft message he never sent. Make sure his mother sees it. She should know he was trying to forgive me." Chen nodded. "We'll take care of it." As they led James away, Marcus stayed behind in the cabin. The empty bourbon bottle sat on the table like evidence of despair. The hunting trophies stared down with their glassy eyes, witnesses to a confession that had been 8 years in the making. Rex trotted over and sat beside Marcus, sensing his human's distress. Marcus scratched the dog's ears. "Good work, boy. We found him." But even as he said it, Marcus wasn't sure what they'd actually found. A suspect? A victim? A friend destroyed by his own fear? Maybe all 3. The interrogation room at Atlanta PD was designed to break people down. Harsh fluorescent lighting, uncomfortable chairs, walls the color of institutional despair. James sat across from Detective Chen and ADA Patricia Morse, a sharp-faced woman in her 40s who'd built her career on high-profile convictions. Marcus watched through one-way glass as his friend's lawyer, Angela Brooks, a black woman with gray-streaked hair and tired eyes, shuffled through papers. "My client wants to make a statement," Brooks said. Morse leaned forward. "Before we begin, Mr. Carter, you understand that anything you say can and will be used against you in court." "I understand." "And you've waived your right to remain silent?" "I have." James looked directly into the camera. "My name is James Robert Carter. I'm 41 years old, and I've been a police officer for 18 years. On March 12, 2024, David Thompson died in my presence. I want to tell you exactly what happened." He paused, gathering himself. "David and I had been involved for 3 months, romantically involved. I know how that sounds. Older officer, younger subordinate. But it wasn't predatory. It was love, maybe the only real love I've ever felt." Morse made notes. Chen watched silently. "I've been HIV positive for 8 years, James continued. My viral load has been undetectable for 5 years, meaning the risk of transmission is virtually 0. But I never told David. I was afraid of losing him." "Why didn't you disclose your status?" Morse asked. James met her eyes. "Because I'm a coward. Because I've spent 8 years hiding who I am, and I'd gotten good at it. Because I told myself I was protecting him, when really I was protecting myself. What happened the night Officer Thompson died? David found out about my HIV status when his own test came back positive. He called me, and I could hear in his voice betrayal, pain. When I got to his apartment, he was devastated." James's voice cracked slightly. He didn't care about the virus. He cared that I'd lied to him. He said he would have understood, would have been okay with it, if I'd just trusted him enough to tell the truth. How did the argument escalate? David was throwing things, saying his life was over. I tried to calm him down, but he grabbed a piece of broken glass, said if he was going to die anyway, he'd do it himself. The room fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. I tried to stop him. We struggled over the glass. He slipped and fell backward, hit his head on the corner of his coffee table. The impact... James closed his eyes. He died instantly. Why didn't you call 911? Because I panicked. Because I knew how it would look. Because I've spent so many years hiding that running felt natural. Morse leaned back. Mr. Carter, are you saying Officer Thompson's death was accidental? I'm saying David Thompson died because I was too much of a coward to trust him with the truth. If I'd told him about my status from the beginning, he would have made an informed choice. He might have walked away, but he'd still be alive. Angela Brooks spoke up. My client is prepared to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter. We'll consider it, Morse said. But there are other charges to discuss: fleeing the scene, obstruction of justice, violation of public trust. I understand, James said. I'll accept responsibility for all of it. Marcus turned away from the glass. He'd heard enough. His partner of 12 years had just confessed to causing the death of a 26-year-old officer whose only crime was falling in love. But as Marcus walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real criminals were still walking free. The system that forced good people to live in shadows. The prejudices that made love feel dangerous. The fear that turned trust into a luxury most people couldn't afford. With James in custody and his confession recorded, Captain Rodriguez turned her attention to the corruption that had created the conditions for tragedy. Burner Price sat in interrogation room B, no longer smug, his lawyer whispering urgent advice that Price seemed inclined to ignore. Let's talk about your relationship with Marcus Rodriguez, Detective Chen said, sliding a bank statement across the table. Price glanced at the paper. $47,000 in deposits over 18 months. That's a lot of money for a detective's salary. I do consulting work. What kind of consulting? Price's lawyer leaned forward. My client exercises his right to remain silent. But Price was past caring about legal strategy. Security consulting for local businesses. Chen pulled out another document. MG Consulting is a shell company owned by Marcus Rodriguez, known drug trafficker. You've been selling police intelligence. Alleged drug trafficker. We raided his operation this morning. Found enough cocaine to supply half of Atlanta, plus detailed police raid schedules with your handwriting on them. Price's face went pale. I want to make a deal. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Bernard, don't. Shut up. Price shook off the lawyer's grip. How much time are we talking about? Depends on your cooperation, Chen said. Start with the blackmail. What blackmail? James Carter and David Thompson. You've been extorting money from them for months. Price laughed bitterly. Carter never paid me a dime. Kid was too proud, too honest. I threatened to expose their relationship, but he called my bluff. Chen frowned. Then what leverage did you have? None, really, but Carter didn't know that. He was so paranoid about being outed that he assumed I had more power than I did. All I had to do was make vague threats, and he'd share information about upcoming operations. Information you sold to Rodriguez. Information that kept me alive. You think I wanted to be dirty? Rodriguez had photos of my daughter walking to school. Said accidents happen to pretty little girls if their daddies don't cooperate. Chen studied Price's face. For the first time since the interrogation began, he looked genuinely frightened. Why didn't you report the threats? To who? Internal Affairs? Half of them are on Rodriguez's payroll too. The FBI? I had no proof, no recordings. Just the word of a crooked cop against a businessman with political connections. So you chose to become more crooked. I chose to keep my daughter alive. Price's voice broke. You got kids, detective? Chen didn't answer. Rodriguez owns this city, owns judges, councilmen, cops. The only reason he's going down now is because Carter's mess brought too much attention. Rodriguez doesn't like attention. Chen made notes. What else can you tell us about Rodriguez's operation? Everything, locations, suppliers, distribution networks, payroll. Price met her eyes. I want protection for my family, reduced charges, and a transfer to federal custody. In exchange, I'll give you the biggest drug bust in Georgia history." Dorothy Thompson had buried her husband 10 years ago, lost her mother to cancer 5 years before that, and thought she understood grief. But nothing had prepared her for the phone call telling her that her only child, her brilliant, beautiful, ambitious son, was dead at 26. She sat in the waiting area of the Atlanta Police Department, still wearing the black dress from David's funeral, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying, which Marcus supposed she probably was. "Mrs. Thompson," Marcus approached carefully. "I'm Detective Williams. I worked with your son." She looked up, David's eyes in an older face, red-rimmed with tears but alert. "You're the one who caught the man who killed him." "Yes, ma'am. I want to see him." Marcus sat down beside her. "Ma'am, I don't think I want to see the man who took my son away from me." The pain in her voice was so raw that Marcus had to look away. "Mrs. Thompson, James Carter was David's friend. It's complicated." "Complicated how? My son is dead. This man killed him. What's complicated about that?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "Your son and Detective Carter had a personal relationship. When David found out about Carter's HIV status, there was an argument. David's death was accidental." Dorothy Thompson stared at him for a long moment. "HIV status? Yes, ma'am? Are you telling me my son was—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Your son was gay, Mrs. Thompson. He was in a relationship with Detective Carter." The words hit her like physical blows. Marcus watched emotions cycle across her face. Shock, denial, anger, grief. Finally, she spoke. "How long?" "About 3 months. And this HIV, did David—" "He tested positive. But ma'am, that doesn't mean—" "Oh God." Dorothy Thompson doubled over like she'd been shot. "Oh God, my baby." Marcus put a hand on her shoulder, feeling utterly inadequate. What could he say? That modern HIV treatment meant David could have lived a normal life? That being gay wasn't something to be ashamed of? That love was love, regardless of gender? None of it would bring her son back. "Mrs. Thompson, David left a message on his phone, a draft he never sent. I think you should read it." She looked up, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "What kind of message?" Marcus pulled out his phone, found the screenshot Chen had sent him. "He was writing to James when it happened." Dorothy Thompson read the message with trembling hands. "I loved you so much I would have been okay with it. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth?" She read it twice, then handed the phone back. He was trying to forgive him. "Yes, ma'am." Even knowing what it might mean for his future, for his health, he was trying to forgive the man who lied to him. "Your son had a good heart." Dorothy Thompson stood up abruptly. "I want to see him, the detective. I want to look him in the eye. Ma'am, I really don't think—" "Detective Williams, my son is dead. I'll never see him graduate from the police academy, never dance at his wedding, never hold his children. The least I can do is look at the man responsible and try to understand how this happened." Marcus knew he should refuse. Victim's family confronting the suspect was against protocol, potentially dangerous. Definitely not his decision to make. But something in Dorothy Thompson's voice, a mother's need for answers, made him nod. "I'll see what I can arrange." The conference room was neutral territory. Not an interrogation room, not a cell, just a space with a table and chairs and windows that looked out on Atlanta's skyline. James sat on one side, still in his orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed to a chain around his waist. Dorothy Thompson sat across from him, Marcus beside her for support. They looked at each other in silence for a long moment, the mother and the man who'd caused her son's death. "You don't look like a killer," Dorothy finally said. James met her eyes. "I don't feel like one either, but I suppose that doesn't matter." "Tell me about my son." "Ma'am?" "Tell me about David. What was he like? What did you see in him?" James glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragement. "He was brilliant, kind. He had this laugh that could light up a room. He cared about people. Really cared. He'd stay late to help with cases, always volunteering for extra shifts. He wanted to make detective by 30, said he wanted to solve cases that helped families find closure." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. He was like that as a boy, always bringing home stray animals, standing up for kids who got picked on. I used to worry he cared too much. He talked about you all the time, said you were his hero, that you raised him alone after his father died. He was proud of that, proud of how strong you were. If I was so strong, why didn't he tell me he was gay? The question hung in the air. James looked down at his cuffed hands. Because he was afraid, James said quietly. Because the world teaches us that love like ours is something to be ashamed of. Because even in 2024, being gay in law enforcement can still end your career. But not with me, not with his mother. Maybe not, but when you've been hiding for so long, it becomes automatic. You stop trusting anyone with the truth. Dorothy leaned forward. Is that what happened with the HIV? You stopped trusting? I never started trusting. I was diagnosed 8 years ago, and I've been lying about it ever since, to everyone, friends, colleagues, romantic partners. I told myself I was protecting them, but really, I was protecting myself. From what? From rejection, from disgust, from being seen as damaged goods. James's voice was barely above a whisper. I'd rather have love based on lies than no love at all. And my son paid the price for your cowardice. The words were delivered without malice, just stated as fact. James flinched as if she'd slapped him. Yes, ma'am, he did. Dorothy Thompson studied his face. Do you love him? Ma'am? My son. Do you love him, or was this just convenience? I love him more than I've ever loved anyone in my life. I would have married him if he'd let me. I would have spent the rest of my life making him happy. But you couldn't trust him with the truth. No, and now he's dead because of it. Dorothy reached across the table and took James's cuffed hands in hers. The gesture was so unexpected that both James and Marcus started. Mr. Carter, I can't forgive you. Not today, maybe not ever, but I can see that you love my son, and I can see that his death is destroying you. James began to cry, silent tears that he made no effort to wipe away. What I want to know, Dorothy continued, is what you're going to do with the rest of your life. How are you going to honor David's memory? I don't know. I haven't thought past dying, past giving up. Dorothy's grip tightened. My son died trying to forgive you. The least you can do is live in a way that makes his forgiveness meaningful. She released his hands and stood up. I hope you find a way to make this right, Mr. Carter. Not for me, not for the legal system, but for David. He deserves better than a lover who gives up. As she walked to the door, she paused. Detective Williams, I want to start a foundation. Something to help police officers who are struggling with identity issues, health problems, whatever makes them feel like they have to hide. Can you help me with that? Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. I think David would like that very much. Dorothy Thompson smiled for the first time since Marcus had met her. Yes, I think he would too. 6 months later, Fulton County Superior Court was packed for the trial of Detective James Carter. The media had latched onto the story. HIV, homosexuality, police corruption, a young officer's tragic death, and turned it into a national conversation about secrecy and stigma in law enforcement. James sat at the defendant's table in a dark suit, looking older and thinner than Marcus remembered. His lawyer, Angela Brooks, shuffled through papers while ADA Patricia Morse prepared her opening statement. Marcus sat in the gallery next to Dorothy Thompson, who had insisted on attending every day of the trial. Rex, now officially retired from the K-9 unit, lay at Marcus's feet in his new role as therapy dog. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Morse began, this case is about trust, about the sacred bond between police officers who depend on each other for their lives, about what happens when that trust is betrayed. She paced in front of the jury box, her voice carrying clearly through the packed courtroom. The defendant, James Carter, was HIV positive for 8 years. For 8 years, he hid this information from everyone, his colleagues, his superiors, and most tragically, from David Thompson, the young man he claimed to love. Morse paused at the prosecution table, lifted a photo of David in uniform. David Thompson was 26 years old. He'd just transferred to Atlanta to start his dream job as a police officer. He was everything you'd want in a cop, honest, dedicated, brave. He trusted James Carter. He trusted him with his heart, his body, his future. She turned back to the jury. That trust was betrayed when David discovered the defendant's HIV status, when he realized he'd been exposed to a potentially fatal disease without his knowledge or consent. He confronted the defendant. The defendant's response was not confession, not apology, but violence. David Thompson died because James Carter couldn't face the consequences of his lies. Marcus watched the jury's faces. They were listening, but he couldn't read their reactions. The defense will try to tell you this was an accident, Morse continued, that David Thompson died during a struggle over a piece of glass. But ask yourselves, would there have been a struggle if the defendant had been honest from the beginning? Would David Thompson be alive today if James Carter had trusted him with the truth? She returned to her seat. The people ask you to find James Carter guilty of second-degree murder. Thank you. Angela Brooks stood for the defense opening. She was older than Morse, with gray-streaked hair and the bearing of someone who'd fought difficult battles in courtrooms across the South. Ladies and gentlemen, Ada Morse is right about one thing. This case is about trust, but not the kind of trust she described. This case is about what happens when society creates conditions where trust becomes impossible. Brooks moved closer to the jury. James Carter is HIV positive. In 2024, that shouldn't be a death sentence or a source of shame. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where HIV-positive people lose jobs, lose families, lose lives because of stigma and ignorance. She gestured toward James. For 8 years, my client lived in fear. Not just fear of his own mortality, but fear of rejection, fear of discrimination, fear of being seen as less than human because of a virus he didn't choose to contract. Brooks paused, letting the words sink in. David Thompson was James Carter's first real love. For the first time in 8 years, my client felt like he might have a future worth living. Was he wrong to hide his HIV status? Yes. Was he wrong to let fear override honesty? Absolutely. But does that make him a murderer? She shook her head. David Thompson died in a tragic accident during a mental health crisis. He died because he was trying to hurt himself, and James Carter was trying to save him. This isn't murder. It's a tragedy born of secrecy and stigma and a society that makes love feel dangerous. Brooks returned to the defense table. I ask you to see James Carter not as a monster, but as a man who made terrible choices out of fear. Find him guilty of manslaughter if you must, but don't let this courtroom become another place where love is punished and fear is rewarded. The trial would last 3 weeks. Marcus attended every day, watching as prosecutors painted James as a predator and defenders painted him as a victim. The truth, as usual, was somewhere in between. Dr. Michael Hassan took the witness stand on day 8 of the trial, his medical bag at his feet like a security blanket. Ada Morse led him through his credentials, 15 years practicing internal medicine, 5 years as the police department's consulting physician. Dr. Hassan, did you treat the defendant for HIV? I did. James Carter has been my patient for 8 years. And his condition? Stable. With proper medication, his viral load has been undetectable for the past 5 years. What does undetectable mean in practical terms? It means the amount of virus in his blood is so low that standard tests can't detect it. The risk of sexual transmission is essentially zero. Morse nodded. So the defendant knew he posed minimal risk to sexual partners? Yes. Yet he didn't disclose his status to David Thompson. Not to my knowledge. Did you treat David Thompson? Hassan shifted uncomfortably. I performed his annual physical examination. And the results? Mr. Thompson tested positive for HIV antibodies. A murmur went through the gallery. Dorothy Thompson gripped Marcus's hand. When did you inform Officer Thompson of this result? The evening of March 12th, around 8 p.m. How did he react? He was devastated, demanded a retest, asked about transmission windows, wanted to know how long he might have been infected. Did he mention James Carter specifically? Hassan glanced at the defense table. He asked about another officer's health status. I couldn't share specifics due to patient confidentiality, but I may have suggested he speak to the person directly. Thank you, Doctor. Angela Brooks stood for cross-examination. Dr. Hassan, you said undetectable viral load means essentially zero risk of transmission. Can you explain that to the jury? Studies showed that people with undetectable viral loads cannot transmit HIV through sexual contact. The medical community calls it undetectable equals untransmittable, or UIU. So if James Carter had an undetectable viral load, He could not have infected David Thompson? Morse objected. Speculation. Sustained. Brooks tried a different approach. Doctor, is it possible for someone to contract HIV from a source other than James Carter? Objection. Beyond the scope. Overruled, the witness may answer. Yes, it's possible. HIV transmission can occur through multiple routes: sexual contact, needle sharing, blood transfusion, other partners. So we don't know definitively that James Carter infected David Thompson? No, we don't. Thank you, Doctor. Bernard Price took the stand on day 12, escorted by federal marshals. He'd already pled guilty to corruption charges and was testifying in exchange for a reduced sentence. Detective Price, Morse began, how long have you known the defendant? 15 years. We worked together in narcotics before he transferred to homicide. Did you know about his HIV status? I found out about 18 months ago. Hospital contacts, you know. Information gets around. What did you do with that information? Price glanced at his lawyer, then at James. I used it as leverage. Leverage for what? Information. James worked high-profile cases, had access to raid schedules, evidence reports. I needed that information for business purposes. You blackmailed him? I reminded him that his secret could damage his career. He was motivated to be helpful. Morse pulled out a bank statement. You received $47,000 over 18 months from Marcus Rodriguez's organization. Was that payment for police intelligence? Yes. Intelligence provided by James Carter? Some of it. Did you threaten to expose his relationship with David Thompson? I mentioned it might be problematic if certain information became public. And Carter complied with your demands? Usually. Brooks took over for cross-examination. Detective Price, you testified that you blackmailed my client for information. Did you ever ask him for money? No. Did he ever pay you directly? No. So James Carter was providing intelligence under duress, not for personal profit? I guess you could put it that way. You also testified about threatening to expose his relationship with David Thompson. Did you ever threaten physical harm? Not to them, but Rodriguez made it clear that non-cooperation had consequences. What kind of consequences? Price's voice dropped. He had photos of my daughter walking to school. Said accidents happen to pretty little girls. So you were being coerced as well? Objection, relevance. Goes to state of mind, Your Honor. Overruled. Yes, I was being coerced, but that doesn't excuse what I did. Brooks nodded. No further questions. Marcus testified on day 15, the hardest day of the trial for everyone involved. He'd known both men, worked with both, considered James a brother, and David a promising young officer with unlimited potential. Detective Williams, Morse began, how long have you known the defendant? 12 years. We've been partners for most of that time. Did you know about his HIV status? Not until after David's death. Did you know about his relationship with David Thompson? No. Were you surprised to learn about these concealed aspects of the defendant's life? Marcus looked at James, who was staring at his hands. Yes, but not because I thought there was anything wrong with being gay or HIV positive. I was surprised because James felt like he couldn't trust me with the truth. Do you believe the defendant is capable of murder? Objection. Calls for speculation. I'll rephrase. Based on your 12 years of partnership, do you believe James Carter is a violent person? Marcus considered the question carefully. No, James was one of the gentlest people I've ever known. He'd rather talk someone down than use force. I've seen him de-escalate situations that other officers would have handled with violence. Yet he fled the scene of David Thompson's death instead of calling for help. Yes. How do you explain that behavior? Marcus looked at Dorothy Thompson in the gallery, then back at the prosecutor. Fear. James had been living in fear for so long that running felt natural. It wasn't rational, but fear rarely is. Angela Brooks approached for cross-examination. Detective Williams, in your 12 years as James Carter's partner, did you ever see him lie to protect someone? Yes, many times. Can you give an example? James once told a mother that her son died instantly in a car crash, even though we knew he'd lived for several minutes in pain. He thought the truth would cause unnecessary suffering. So lying to protect others was consistent with his character? Yes. Do you believe James Carter loved David Thompson? Morse objected. Speculation. Goes to motive, Your Honor. I'll allow it. Marcus thought about the text messages, the journal entries, the broken man he'd found in that cabin. Yes, I believe James loved David more than he'd ever loved anyone. Thank you, Detective. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Marcus spent those 48 hours pacing his apartment, walking Rex through every park in Atlanta, and trying not to think about what would happen next. On the morning of day 3, his phone rang. "Verdict's in," Captain Rodriguez said. "Court reconvenes at 2 p.m. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Media, police officers, activists from both sides of the HIV/AIDS debate, and Dorothy Thompson in the front row, wearing the same black dress she'd worn to David's funeral. James stood as the jury foreman, a middle-aged black woman who worked as a nurse, prepared to read the verdict. On the charge of murder in the second degree, we find the defendant not guilty. A murmur went through the courtroom. James's shoulders sagged with relief. On the charge of voluntary manslaughter, we find the defendant not guilty. Dorothy Thompson closed her eyes. On the charge of involuntary manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty. James nodded, accepting the verdict. It was what Angela Brooks had been hoping for, a recognition that David's death was tragic, but not intentionally caused. Judge Maria Santos, a Latina woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness, scheduled sentencing for the following week. "Mr. Carter, please stand." James rose from the defense table, Angela Brooks beside him. He'd lost 20 pounds during the trial, and his uniform hung loose on his frame. "The court has reviewed the pre-sentencing report, victim impact statements, and letters of support submitted on your behalf. I've also considered the unique circumstances of this case." Judge Santos paused, looking directly at James. David Thompson was 26 years old when he died. He was starting his career, building relationships, contributing to his community. His death was a tremendous loss, not just to his family, but to the profession he'd chosen to serve. Dorothy Thompson dabbed her eyes with a tissue. However, the evidence shows that Officer Thompson's death was not the result of malice or criminal intent. It was the tragic culmination of a relationship built on deception, fear, and the societal pressures that make honesty feel impossible. The judge picked up a document from her desk. "Mr. Carter, you made a series of choices that led to tragedy. You chose secrecy over honesty, fear over trust, self-protection over love. Those choices cost a young man his life and destroyed your own." James stood perfectly still, accepting the words. "The court sentences you to 7 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 4 years. You will also complete 500 hours of community service focused on HIV/AIDS education and LGBTQ+ advocacy." She set down the document. "I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on the man you want to be when you're released. David Thompson can't be brought back, but perhaps some good can come from this tragedy if you commit yourself to living honestly and helping others do the same." The gavel fell. James was led away in handcuffs, but not before he turned to look at Dorothy Thompson one last time. She nodded at him, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that they were both trying to make sense of senseless loss. Hayes State Prison wasn't the worst place James could have ended up, but it wasn't home. He shared a cell with Michael "Tank" Washington, a 47-year-old man serving time for drug trafficking who'd been HIV positive for 15 years. "You got a visitor," the guard announced on a Tuesday morning in March. James expected his lawyer, or maybe Marcus. He didn't expect Dorothy Thompson. She sat across from him in the visiting room, older than he remembered, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a manila folder. "Mrs. Thompson." James's voice was hoarse from surprise. "Mr. Carter." She opened the folder, pulled out photographs. "I wanted to show you something." The photos were of a groundbreaking ceremony. Dozens of people in hard hats and suits, shovels in the ground, a sign reading, "David Thompson Center for LGBTQ+ Law Enforcement." "We broke ground last month," Dorothy said. "It'll be a support center for police officers struggling with identity issues, health problems, anything that makes them feel like they have to hide." James studied the photos. That's wonderful. The funding came from multiple sources: police unions, city government, private donations, even some money from the Bernard Price case. His seized assets were donated to the cause. She pulled out another photo, this one of a young black man in a police uniform, This is Officer Kevin Martinez. He's 24, openly gay, HIV positive, and one of the best cops in his department. He's going to run the center's peer counseling program." James looked at the photo. Officer Martinez was smiling, confident. Everything David could have been if he'd lived in a world where honesty felt safe. "Why are you showing me this?" James asked. "Because I want you to see what David's death accomplished. He died because of secrecy and fear, but his death is creating a world where other officers don't have to live that way." Dorothy leaned forward. "I also want to offer you a job. Ma'am, when you get out next year, the center will need someone to coordinate HIV/AIDS education programs. Someone who understands both the medical and emotional aspects of living with the virus." James stared at her. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work for David, to make sure his death means something." The visiting room was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and distant conversations from other tables. "Mrs. Thompson, I don't understand. I killed your son." "No," she said firmly. "Fear killed my son. Secrecy killed my son. A society that makes love feel dangerous killed my son. You were just the weapon those things used." She gathered the photos. "I can't forgive you, Mr. Carter, but I can see that you love David, and I can see that you're trying to become a better man. The center needs someone who understands the cost of hiding, the price of dishonesty. You've paid that price. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? Then you'll try again." That's what David would have done. Dorothy Thompson stood to leave. "Think about it. David believed in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that people could change. Don't make his faith meaningless." Marcus was waiting outside Hayes State Prison when James walked through the gates, carrying everything he owned in a brown paper bag. 5 years had changed both men. Marcus was grayer, more lined around the eyes, while James was thinner but somehow more solid, like prison had burned away everything non-essential. Rex, now 8 years old and moving more slowly, still insisted on coming along for the ride. The dog remembered James and wagged his tail when the former detective climbed into Marcus's car. "How you feeling?" Marcus asked as they drove toward Atlanta. "Scared, grateful, guilty." James scratched Rex behind the ears. "How's the job market for ex-cons with HIV? Dorothy Thompson wants to meet with you tomorrow, something about the center. She visited me last year, made an offer. You gonna take it?" James watched Atlanta's skyline grow larger through the windshield. The city looked the same, but felt different, like he was seeing it through someone else's eyes. "I don't know if I deserve it." "Maybe that's not the question," Marcus said. "Maybe the question is whether you can do the work." They drove in comfortable silence until Marcus pulled into the parking lot of a modest apartment complex in Decatur. "1 bedroom, furnished, first month's rent paid," Marcus said. "Dorothy Thompson's foundation covers it for the first year." James looked at the building. "She's been planning this for a while. She wants you to succeed, James. We all do." That night, James sat in his new apartment with a phone number Dorothy Thompson had given him and a decision to make. The number belonged to Officer Kevin Martinez, the young man who was running peer counseling at the David Thompson Center. James dialed before he could change his mind. "Officer Martinez, this is James Carter. I think we need to talk." The David Thompson Center occupied a converted warehouse in downtown Atlanta, not far from the police headquarters where David had worked for his brief 2 months. The building buzzed with activity. Officers coming for counseling sessions, support group meetings, educational workshops. James stood in the lobby on his first day, wearing a donated suit that almost fit, clutching a folder with his employment paperwork. A large photo of David in uniform hung on the wall, smiling with the confidence of someone who believed the world was full of possibilities. "Mr. Carter?" James turned to find Officer Kevin Martinez approaching. The young man was shorter than James expected, with warm eyes and an easy smile that reminded him painfully of David. "Officer Martinez, thank you for meeting with me. Kevin's fine. We're pretty informal here." Kevin gestured around the lobby. "What do you think?" "It's impressive. David would have loved this." "That's the idea. Come on, let me show you around." They walked through the center, meeting rooms named after LGBTQ+ pioneers, a library filled with resources on everything from coming out to HIV management, offices where counselors met with officers struggling with identity issues. "We serve about 200 officers across 3 states, Kevin explained. "Some come in person, Others use our hotline or video counseling. Last month, we prevented 2 suicides and helped 6 officers come out safely to their families. James stopped at a wall covered with photos and testimonials. Officers who'd found help at the center. Families who'd been supported through difficult transitions. Success stories born from tragedy. "How do you do it?" James asked. "Live openly in law enforcement, I mean. Deal with the prejudice, the whispers behind your back." Kevin studied James's face. "You really want to know?" "Yeah. I remember that I'm not the first. That men like David Thompson and James Carter fought battles so I wouldn't have to. That their struggle, your struggle, made space for mine." They continued the tour, ending in a small office with James's name on a temporary placard. "Your job is HIV/AIDS education and support," Kevin said. "You'll counsel officers who've been diagnosed, provide education to departments, help families understand what it means to love someone who's positive." James sat behind the desk, testing how it felt. "What if they don't want to listen to me? What if they see a killer instead of a counselor? Then you'll have to prove them wrong, one conversation at a time." Kevin headed for the door, then paused. "James, David's mother talks about you sometimes. She says you were the love of his life, even if you were too scared to live up to it. Maybe it's time to stop being scared." Officer Sarah Chen, no relation to Detective Lisa Chen, was 29 years old, Asian American, and had been HIV positive for 6 months. She sat across from James in his office, arms crossed, suspicious. "So you're the guy who killed that cop in Atlanta?" James met her eyes. "Yes. And now you're supposed to help me feel better about being positive? I'm supposed to help you understand that being HIV positive doesn't mean your life is over, and that lying about it to people you care about will destroy you." Sarah uncrossed her arms. "How long have you been positive?" 12 years. "How long did you keep it secret?" 11 years and 11 months. "What changed?" James thought about David, about Dorothy Thompson, about the last 4 years in prison learning to live with truth. "I finally got tired of being afraid all the time." "Are you still afraid?" "Every day, but I'm more afraid of lying now." Sarah leaned forward. "My girlfriend doesn't know. We've been together 2 years, and I can't figure out how to tell her." "What scares you most about telling her?" "That she'll leave, that she'll think I'm dirty, damaged, that she'll tell other people." James nodded. "Those are all reasonable fears. What scares you most about not telling her?" "That I'll infect her, that she'll find out some other way, that I'll spend the rest of our relationship waiting for the other shoe to drop." "So you're afraid either way?" "Yeah." James pulled out a notebook, wrote something down, and slid it across the desk. "This is the number for Dr. Hassan at Atlanta General. He's been treating HIV patients for 20 years. Make an appointment for you and your girlfriend together." "What if she won't come?" "Then you'll know where you stand. But my guess is she loves you enough to want to understand." Sarah took the paper. "What if she leaves anyway?" "Then you'll know you were honest. And honesty, even when it hurts, is better than living a lie." After Sarah left, James sat in his office thinking about David, about all the conversations they could have had if James had been brave enough to trust him with the truth. The what-ifs would always be there, but maybe he could help other people avoid the same mistakes. His phone rang. "James, it's Sarah. I'm calling my girlfriend now." Marcus found James in his office on a Friday evening, reading case files and making notes. Rex, now a permanent fixture at the center, was sleeping under the desk. "Working late?" Marcus asked. "New referral from Birmingham. Officer got diagnosed last month. Thinks his career is over." James looked up. "How are things at APD?" "Different. Better in some ways. We have mandatory sensitivity training now. Updated policies on disclosure and discrimination. Rodriguez cleaned house after the Price investigation, fired 6 officers, referred 4 more for federal prosecution." Marcus sat down, Rex automatically moving to rest his head on Marcus's knee. "Price got 15 years. Rodriguez got life without parole. The drug operation is completely dismantled." "Good. There's something else." Marcus pulled out an envelope. "Dorothy Thompson asked me to give you this." James opened it to find a handwritten letter and a photograph. The photo showed a young police officer receiving an award, the plaque reading, "David Thompson Memorial Award for Exceptional Service." The letter was brief. "James, Officer Martinez from your center nominated Officer Lisa Park for the first David Thompson Memorial Award. She's 25, openly gay, and has worked extensively with homeless LGBTQ+ youth, the kind of officer David would have become. I thought you should know that David's name is now associated with hope instead of tragedy, that his story is inspiring other young officers to serve with courage and authenticity. Thank you for the work you're doing. David would be proud. Dorothy. James folded the letter carefully. She's remarkable. Yeah, Rex likes her too. Marcus scratched the dog's ears. You know what I think? What? I think you're finally becoming the man David fell in love with. James considered this. Maybe. I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do. They sat in comfortable silence, two friends who'd weathered tragedy and found their way back to each other. Outside the window, Atlanta's lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the city, police officers were learning that love didn't have to be hidden, and truth didn't have to be dangerous. The auditorium at the Georgia Police Academy was packed with recruits, veteran officers, family members, and activists. James stood at the podium, looking out at 300 faces representing every demographic of modern law enforcement. 10 years ago, he began, I killed the man I loved. The room fell silent. Not with my hands, but with my fear, with 8 years of lies and secrets and the cowardice of someone who wanted love more than he wanted truth. James found Dorothy Thompson in the front row, sitting next to Officer Kevin Martinez and a young woman in uniform he didn't recognize. David Thompson died because I was afraid to trust him with who I really was. He died because I thought protection was more important than honesty. He died because I believed the lie that love built on deception could somehow survive. A young recruit raised her hand. Sir, how do we know when it's safe to be honest? How do we know people will accept us? James smiled. You don't. That's what makes it brave. He clicked to the next slide, a photo of the David Thompson Center. But you can create safety by being the person others can trust with their truth, by standing up when someone makes a homophobic joke, by supporting colleagues who are struggling, by being the change you want to see in law enforcement. Another hand. What about HIV? How do we handle positive officers in the field? The same way you handle diabetic officers, or officers with heart conditions, or any other medical issue. You follow universal precautions, you treat people with dignity, and you remember that HIV status has nothing to do with someone's ability to serve and protect. After the presentation, James mingled with attendees. The young woman from the front row approached, Officer Lisa Park, this year's David Thompson Award winner. Mr. Carter, I wanted to thank you. For what? For showing us that mistakes don't have to be permanent, that we can choose to become better. James shook her hand. That's all David ever wanted, for people to become their best selves. As the crowd dispersed, Dorothy Thompson approached. She was 68 now, her hair completely gray, but her eyes still sharp with David's intelligence. Good speech, she said. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't miss it, she paused. James, I have something to tell you. Ma'am, I forgive you. The words hit him like a physical blow. After 10 years, he'd stopped expecting forgiveness, stopped thinking he deserved it. Mrs. Thompson, Dorothy, and I mean it, not because what you did was okay, but because I've watched you spend 10 years trying to make it right. David would forgive you too. James felt tears he didn't know he'd been holding back. I miss him every day. So do I. But I see him in the work you're doing, in the officers you've helped, in the lives that are better because you chose to live honestly after his death. She handed him an envelope. One more thing. Inside was a photo of David and James from their last weekend together, laughing over coffee at Mrs. Park's cafe. James had forgotten about it, a candid shot taken by another customer who thought they looked happy. I found it in David's things, Dorothy said. I think he would want you to have it. Marcus found James in the memorial garden behind the David Thompson Center, sitting on a bench beneath an oak tree planted in David's honor. Rex lay at his feet, now 11 years old and moving slowly, but still insisting on daily walks. Thought I might find you here, Marcus said, settling beside his old partner. It's peaceful. James touched the bronze plaque embedded in the tree's base. David Thompson, 1997 to 2024. He lived and died, believing in love. Dorothy says you're thinking about retiring. From the center, yeah. Kevin doesn't need me anymore. The program runs itself now. What's next? James pulled out a letter from his jacket. Got accepted to nursing school. Emory University. Full scholarship from the David Thompson Foundation. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Nursing school? At 51? David always said I was a caretaker at heart. Maybe it's time to make it official. A young couple walked past. 2 police officers holding hands, wedding rings glinting in the afternoon sun. They nodded respectfully at James, who smiled back. Times are changing, Marcus observed. Slowly, but yeah. They sat in comfortable silence, watching families visit the garden, officers finding quiet moments between shifts, young people drawing inspiration from David's story. James? Yeah, you did good. David would be proud. James touched the photo in his pocket, David laughing, eyes bright with possibility, captured in a moment when love felt infinite. I hope so, he said. I really hope so. As the sun set over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, James Carter finally understood what Dorothy Thompson had tried to tell him years ago. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a future worthy of the love that had been lost. Somewhere in the city, police officers were living openly and honestly. Somewhere, young people with HIV were getting the support they needed. Somewhere, love was winning over fear. And in a memorial garden beneath an oak tree, the spirit of David Thompson lived on in every life his story had touched, every truth his death had made possible, every moment of authentic love his memory had inspired. In memory of all the David Thompsons and James Carters, whose real stories we may never hear, but whose struggles remind us that behind every badge is a human being deserving of love, acceptance, and the right to live authentically. The David Thompson Center for LGBTQ+ Law Enforcement is fictional, but organizations like it exist across the country, working to create safer, more inclusive environments for all officers. If you or someone you know is struggling with identity issues, health concerns, or thoughts of self-harm, please reach out for help. Love is love, truth is freedom, and every ending can be a new beginning.